My stepson introduced me to his new boss at a company mixer with a single dismissive sentence. "This is my mom's husband. He's retired from something boring. Don't worry about him." I shook the man's hand, said nothing, and let the moment pass the way I'd let 100 moments like it pass over the past 9 years. Then the boss glanced down at the old lanyard I still absent-mindedly wear sometimes, out of habit more than anything, read the agency name printed beneath my photo, and went completely, visibly silent. "My name's Gerald. I married my wife, Susan, 9 years ago, several years after her first husband passed away. Her son, Tyler, was 22 at the time, already out of the house, polite enough at the wedding, cordial enough at holidays, but never particularly interested in getting to know me beyond the basic label of mom's husband. I didn't push it. Blended family relationships, especially with adult stepchildren, often settle into whatever comfortable distance both people are willing to accept, and I was content with cordial. Tyler knew, in the vaguest possible terms, that I'd worked some kind of government job before retiring, and he never asked for more detail than that, which suited me fine, given the actual nature of that work. I spent 26 years as an intelligence analyst and eventually a senior case officer for a federal agency. I'm still not in the habit of naming casually at dinner parties, even in retirement. Most of what I did during those decades remains, quite reasonably, not something I discuss freely, even now. To Tyler, and frankly to most people who know me socially, I've always just been retired from something in government, kind of boring, paperwork mostly. I never corrected that impression. It was, in a strange way, exactly the impression that 30 years of training had taught me to be comfortable maintaining. Over 9 years, Tyler's dismissiveness toward me had never been cruel exactly, just consistently minimizing. At his college graduation, he introduced me to his friends as my mom's husband, rather than any warmer term. At his first job's holiday party, he'd steered conversations away from me whenever coworkers asked polite questions about my background, usually redirecting with something like, "He did boring desk work for the government, nothing interesting." I genuinely didn't take deep offense to most of it. Tyler had a father he lost young, and I understood in a general sense that a stepfather sliding into that specific emotional space 9 years in wasn't something I was owed automatically. I focused on being reliable, present, and low drama, rather than pushing for a title or recognition I didn't think either of us needed. Susan noticed the pattern more than I let on that it bothered me. She'd mentioned, a few times over the years, that she wished Tyler would give me more credit, and I always waved it off, telling her honestly that it genuinely didn't weigh on me the way she seemed to think it should. Tyler had been working for about 8 months at a growing logistics and security consulting firm, a job he was genuinely proud of and talked about often at family dinners. Susan and I were invited to a company mixer celebrating a major new contract the firm had landed, and Tyler, a little reluctantly I think, extended the invitation to us as well. We arrived, made polite conversation with a few of Tyler's coworkers, and eventually found ourselves near a small group that included Tyler's direct supervisor, a sharp, serious woman named Denise Farrow, and beside her, the firm's founder and CEO, a man named Robert Halloran, who I hadn't been introduced to yet. Tyler brought us over, and when Halloran extended his hand to me, Tyler made the introduction that started everything. "This is Gerald, my mom's husband. He's retired from something government-related, kind of boring. Don't worry about him." I shook Halloran's hand, said something polite and forgettable about enjoying the venue, and expected, as always, for the conversation to simply move past me toward more interesting subjects. I happened to still be wearing an old agency retiree lanyard that day, not something I typically wear out, but I'd used it that morning at a VA appointment for identity verification and simply forgotten to remove it before we left for the mixer, tucked mostly under my jacket collar. As I shook Halloran's hand, the lanyard shifted slightly into view. Halloran's eyes flicked down to it, almost automatically, the way people's eyes go to any visible badge or ID in a room full of professionals sizing each other up. His expression changed almost instantly. He read the agency name and my printed last name, and for a solid 3 or 4 seconds, he didn't say anything at all, just looked at the badge, then at my face, clearly recalculating something in real time. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his tone completely different now. "Did you say your name was Gerald Whitfield?" I confirmed it was. Halloran turned to Denise, said something quiet I didn't fully catch, and then turned back to me with an expression that had shifted from polite mixer smile into something considerably more focused. "Mr. Whitfield, our firm's entire executive protection division was built directly off training protocols developed by your former division. I've read case studies with your name in the source citations. I had absolutely no idea you were connected to Tyler." Tyler's expression, standing beside me during this exchange, went through a fairly dramatic transformation of its own. Confusion first, then a kind of stunned recalibration as he watched his boss, a man Tyler clearly held in enormous professional regard, treating his boring stepfather like someone whose name he recognized from actual published training material. Halloran spent the next several minutes asking increasingly specific questions, not about classified specifics, which I gently redirected as I always have, but about the broader shape of the training frameworks, questions that made it clear he'd genuinely studied work I'd contributed to decades earlier, without ever knowing the actual person behind the name. Tyler stood mostly silent through this entire exchange, occasionally glancing at me like he was seeing an entirely different person than the one he'd introduced 5 minutes earlier. Tyler rode with us back to our house afterward instead of taking his own car, which he almost never did. He was quiet for most of the drive before finally asking, somewhat sheepishly, "Gerald, what exactly did you do? Halloran looked at you like you were some kind of legend." I gave him the same general, appropriately vague answer I'd given for 9 years. Decades in federal intelligence work, senior case officer toward the end of my career, work that mostly can't be discussed in specifics even now, which is precisely why I'd never volunteered more detail than something boring in government. I always just assumed that meant, like, actual boring paperwork, Tyler said. "I never thought to ask more because you never seemed like you wanted to talk about it." "I generally don't," I said. "Not because it's a secret I'm protecting from you specifically. It's just genuinely not something I discuss casually with anyone. That's not really a reflection of how much I valued you asking, Tyler. I just never had a reason to correct an assumption that suited both of us fine for 9 years. Tyler's been noticeably different since that mixer, not dramatically, not in some complete personality overhaul, but genuinely different. He started actually asking about my life beyond the vague label he'd comfortably assigned me for nearly a decade. He introduced me at a recent family barbecue, unprompted, as my stepfather, who apparently has a much more interesting background than any of us ever gave him credit for, which, for Tyler, was practically a warm embrace. I don't think Halloran's reaction that day fundamentally changed who I am or what 9 years of quiet, patient stepfathering had already built. What it did was give Tyler a reason to finally look past a label he'd never bothered questioning and start seeing an actual person underneath it. Susan told me later that night, once Tyler had gone home, that she'd been waiting 9 years for a moment like that, not because she needed me validated by anyone, but because she'd always hoped Tyler would eventually see what she'd seen in me from the very beginning. He's getting there. Slowly. 9 years of something boring doesn't unwind in a single evening, but it's a start. If this story got to you, the next one is even more unexpected. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it.